Welcome to Stardust Stereo. I'm Parker McPhinney. I'm your host. Today is the 29th of September, year 2025. Today I'm going to talk about America, the United States, and Chiron, the wounded healer. In our chart, the chart that I use, we have Chiron at 20 degrees Aries and 7 minutes arc. And for the record, I use a chart July 4th, 1776, 12:15 LMT time, Philadelphia. This was a chart that a very seasoned astrologer, Pat Geiser, had used for years and found it very valid. She had rectified the chart. Either she had rectified it or she had gotten it from another astrologer who had. I don't recall because I've had this chart for decades. But I have found it to be most effective in timing. There's other charts that other astrologers use for the United States of America. The difference is the timing will give a different rising sign or the 9 o'clock dial. So in the chart I'm using, America has a Libra rising at 13 degrees and 35 minutes arc. And in this chart, we have a T-square of Saturn, Juno's the marriage asteroid, Saturn's the planet of boundaries, in opposition to Chiron, the wounded healer, also known as the maverick planet. Some astrologers do not recognize Chiron as a planet. And Mercury, which is how we think and speak. That would be all of America. When you're looking at a country's chart, you're looking at the populace. So Mercury in that chart is retrograde. So we have a T-square. And then actually we could say that we have a grand cross, but it's wide because Pluto is also in opposition to that Mercury. Now, I want to talk about America's ongoing issue of shooting up institutions and places of prayer and people who disagree or have a different perspective. And why is it that our country cannot just have a civil conversation and they confuse bullets with an effective way of having a dialogue? Bullets are not effective. It's interesting to me, and I've stated otherwise, the shape of the bullet is a phallic symbol, and there seems to be some confusion with our young men thinking that it's more manly to shoot somebody instead of speak to them. It's not. It's a sign of grave immaturity and anger. And that brings me to Chiron, the wounded healer, that I want to discuss and look at and see where there's glimmers of a hope, where we might turn this ship around and learn how to express ourselves in difficult conversations without having to resort to silencing your opposition. It's interesting to me when I looked at this chart today, Juno, which is the marriage asteroid, is in an exact opposition to Chiron in the USA's birth chart. And anybody who's been married knows if you do not have healthy communication skills, this will become excruciatingly aware to you if you're in a close relationship such as marriage. It will become obvious to people because they won't want to hang out with you. If you can't express yourself without anger, you will be a big drip to be around. And that, of course, will lead to isolation, which will lead to even more inferior complex issues. And so a solution to me seems obvious. We need to learn how to talk to each other. There's very clear evidence that our gun laws are not going to change. So we need to learn how to talk to each other. We need to teach our young people how to speak to each other. We need to learn how to heal our wounded place, the pain in us, our Chiron wounded healer. We need to turn it around into which it becomes a strength. Now you can apply this to your own chart, wherever your Chiron is in your chart, or the house that Chiron is transiting can show up where there's wounds that are made into healing tools to help yourself and others. How they're made into healing tools: when you go through a rough period in your life and you get through it, then you have that experience under your belt. And if others ask you, you can share how you got through your difficult period. Now, that may not be how they get through it, but the fact that you got through it helps many people, because oftentimes when people are going through a down cycle, which we all go through, if we live long enough, we will go through many, many, many up and down cycles. And so when people first deal with disappointment, namely our youth, that, I believe, is where the wounded part within themselves gets triggered. And unfortunately, right now, as Chiron in the sky is going through Aries, ironically, the exact placement that it was when America was born. So we, in essence, just had a Chiron return. I'll talk about that chart. And when you have a Chiron return, it's where you learn to use your wounds in a positive way. Now, what's exasperating this chart, or this wound, or what can make it even larger, is that Jupiter in the sky is squaring America's Chiron. Now, America was born with Jupiter in Cancer, where it is right now, but at an earlier degree. Right now, Jupiter is at 22 degrees in Cancer, and it's just short of conjuncting the USA's Mercury. So we are ripe to learn how to talk, learn the language of debating without getting violent. The late Charlie Kirk did this, I felt, beautifully. In the videos that I watched, I saw nothing but compassion and love and an incredibly bright man. Other people saw a different video and interpreted it in a different way, or saw the same video and came home with a different story, which is not unlike being born in a large family and every single sibling saying, "Oh, no, that never happened," and the other sibling saying, "Oh, yes, it did." So we can agree that everybody has a different perspective, but that shouldn't mean that you have to get a bullet in your neck for it. I have a theory that I try to live by. If I don't like something somebody's saying, I try to understand it. I try to look at several angles. And if I don't get it, I just let it go. You don't have to get your panties in a wad about it. That we have a young population that goes straight to the violence factor is beyond sad. And we do have an epidemic of violence in this country. And part of it I can see through our birth chart, which shows we are very passionate about what we believe here. And of course, we broke away from England. So, of course, in our chart of our birth, it's going to show that there was fighting and a separation and a call to arms. And, you know, we are going to be free. And that's all wonderful, being free. But we still need to learn how to have a conversation with people that we do not agree with in the workplace, in the family, in relationships. You're never going to agree on every single thing. And if you did, that would probably be the most boring relationship in the entire world. But maybe you want a boring relationship. Some people want that. They prefer that. Other people prefer a little stimulation and a little debate now and then. But I don't think anybody really wants to go to the far end of that and say, I love violence, although there are some warped people out there. Now, Chiron is in a sextile, a flowing relationship with our birth Mars. Chiron in the sky and our birth Chiron, because they're both in the same sign right now. And so that indicates to me that we are perfectly capable of doing this. And I do know and remember, because I'm old enough, a time in the past when you could have discussions and they did not end up in the situation where we're currently in this country, where you can't go to the grocery store or the church or the gym or any place without having the awareness that that may be where you fall into danger because some lunatic doesn't know how to speak words. Okay, how do we get out of this? How do we get into talking and away from useless, senseless, horrible violence? What do the stars say? Well, first, we have to make an emotional commitment to learning how to listen. Jupiter will be making a conjunction with Mercury in the USA chart on October 25th this year, on December 4th this year, and then on June 1st in 2026. Those are excellent periods to when you can learn to listen. If in fact you are in dialogue or hearing words come out of your beloved's mouth that you just don't get. Jupiter will square Chiron in the future on January 9th, 2026 and May 8th, 2026. So as we are exploring our marriage to maturity, those will be dates that you can look and see how you're dealing with issues that come up around those dates. All 5 of those dates that I just gave you. October 25th, 2025, December 4th, 2025, June 1st, 2026. That's when Jupiter's conjuncting the USA Mercury. And then Jupiter will square our USA Chiron on January 9th and May 8th. So I've just given you a selection of dates to use as a sliding scale of how your temperature goes up or down and how well you can manage to let things go, let them slide, what you want to stand up for, learning how to have a conversation that doesn't have to get heated. Practice with little issues. Don't let them morph out into big issues. In the USA chart, Chiron in the 7th house represents everybody that's not us. It would also help our country if we have a leader that learns how to have healthy conversations as well. Chiron is about magical action as well, maverick action. Because the Chiron in the America's birth chart is in conjunct to Neptune, that's 150 degree, that indicates to me that we have a slight infatuation with idealism. The whole configuration of our having our Mars in the USA chart also in square to Neptune tells me, the American dream that's becoming less and less as a possible pathway for so many. And actually, that is one point that was brought up in discussions with Charlie Kirk when I listened to his dialogue about how our young people are so disheartened because they don't have an American dream. It's not in reach. They can't, many young people are living with their parents because they can't even afford the rents. So the exasperated cost of living has affected their ability to look at the future as something as hopeful. Now, I don't particularly see that talking point as something that is so outrageously wrong or even incorrect. I think he was spot on. But where do we give that hope to our young people? It's through teaching them critical thinking. Critical thinking with each issue as it comes up, not seeing it as a black and white issue, but a multi-issue, the capacity to carry many thoughts and many dialogues of a point of view and our consciousness to where we problem solve. Critical thinking is nothing other than solving problems. And Chiron in Aries is the hothead, and it can be impatient. So we see that weak link in the chain is the lack of tenacity and patience, the lack of critical thinking. The tipping point needs to go over toward the pioneer, like the pioneers of America that came under grave hardship, but still persisted and managed, not all, but some, of course, to create an entire new reality for themselves. So Jupiter square Chiron in the USA chart is a problem of pain and anger and needing it to switch into maverick thinking. So I looked to the Chiron return chart. Chiron has returned to the position that it was in our birth chart 3 times, this in recent periods. And the first time was April 20th, 2024. Second return, because it went retrograde. When it was retrograde, was November 8th, 2024. And then it's February 18th, 2025. So I would invite you to look and see in your life if there were trigger points during those dates of when you felt especially frustrated or unable to express the Chiron in Aries in a positive manner. Now, not everybody who listens to me is an American. This podcast goes out all over the world, and I have listeners internationally. They wouldn't particularly be concerned with the Jupiter square Chiron that's happening in our birth chart. But Chiron's still in Aries for them, as it is for everybody. So you can take this information and look, how can I be instrumental in my life in being progressive, pioneering, learn to control my anger, learn to use anger in a healthy way to where it stimulates me to get busy and action. How can I have a healthy expression of the wounded healer energy? So where Chiron falls in your chart would hold one answer to that. You'd have to know all the configurations. Then we have a really important total solar eclipse coming up August 12th of 2026. And that will be in Leo. And that particular solar eclipse will be in an exact trine to our birth Chiron in the USA. And that gives me great hope that we will move toward a healthy expression of the Chiron in the USA chart, away from these insane expressions of violence. And I also want to just mention a few things in my research that I found. Chiron was in Aries when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968. It had just entered Aries on April 1st. And Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th of 1968. So we see in the history, and I have other examples as well, that Chiron in Aries can show in its negative aspect how people are so freaked out and immature that they cannot allow another to utter what I consider to be great words. They're so threatened by change. And you cannot stop change. Change is the one absolute of the universe. You can only make friends with it. Another indicator of Chiron in Aries is fevers. And the height of fever, the fever disease, typhus, and the Spanish flu was when Chiron was in Aries, part of that period when that happened. Trench fever as well. That happened in 1918. So we see in the history this hot-headedness, this fevered pitch that can be a result of an influence felt that is not channeled in a positive, healthy way. Also, another little tidbit I noticed, picked up in the Sabian symbols, the 21st degree of Aries is a boxer entering the ring. The 20th degree is a young girl feeding birds in winter. Now, why this is important, those 2 degrees, because America's Chiron is at 20 degrees Aries. And so we could say on some level, we have a choice in front of us. Do we instantly go to the boxing ring? Or do we channel this energy in a nurturing way? I would say that exercise and strategic skill is important in using Chiron and Aries. I know everybody loves football and soccer and these things, but you know, young men's energy is so, especially young, like when they're teenage years, it's so kind of out of control. I recently witnessed this in a swimming pool, some young boys, and I was like, holy moly, gosh, they need to rein in that energy. And they were just being playful, but it seemed pretty intense to me. I have to say, I'm glad I'm female, but it's ultimately the responsibility of every parent out there, every person that guides young people, to help them find healthy ways to use this headstrong energy. We need maverick thinking. We need to explore new horizons and have this excessive strength energy poured out that way. Why we look to Mars placement is because Aries is ruled by Mars. So that expression of Chiron in America's chart, and also Chiron in the sky right now, gets expressed through the flavor of where Mars is in the sky. So we look to see where Mars is in the ephemeris to get a flavor, an additional flavor of how the Aries Chiron energy will play out. So currently Mars is in Scorpio. Scorpio is very much, or can be, Scorpio can hold grudges. Scorpio does not forget. Positive energy of Scorpio is its one-pointedness. It's not giving up until it reaches the goal. So Mars is going to stay in Scorpio until the 5th of November when it moves into Sagittarius, which rules expression in sports, athleticism. It also rules other countries. It rules a global situation. And Mars in Sagittarius is comfortable with the Chiron in Aries. So there's a nice flow, and that flow will continue until the 16th of December when Mars will move into Capricorn, be in a square to that Chiron in America's chart and the Chiron in the sky, one and the same. Going to the end of the year, Mars will stay into that sign of Capricorn until the 24th, which it will move into Aquarius. Aquarius blends very well with the Chiron in Aries placement. So we have a little respite there. That Mars will stay in the Aquarian energy until the 3rd of March. So we've got that little window of when it's in Sagittarius and it's in Aquarius that the energy will have another outlet that it can choose. You always have choices. Those avenues will be very obvious. Clearly, Chiron is not going to stay in Aries, the hothead, forever. It moves into Taurus June 19th of 2026. It'll have a small little return back into Aries on September 17th of 2026 until April 14th of 2027. And then in April 14th of 2027, it will move into Taurus for the next 7 to 8 years. So we've got about another 12 months with a little respite of when it moves into Taurus in June. But we've got basically another year and a few months of having the opportunity to come to terms with our anger and our wounds. And when we have wounds, not lashing out in anger. Learning to take the positive energies of Aries, learning to build things up, not tear them down. And I believe that this has to come from our leadership. I'm much more hopeful about the upcoming solar eclipse of February 17th, 2026. At that time, the return chart of Chiron that I've been analyzing in this podcast, in that solar eclipse of February 17th, 2026, that's sandwiched with the USA's Chiron return chart of February 18th, 2025. I can clearly see that there is going to be tremendous energy focused on how we have dialogue. That particular solar eclipse chart is just packed with energy of the brotherhood of man. It's packed with the potential to learn how to have dialogue, healthy dialogue. So that gives me some hope. I think until that moment, until we get a grip on a way to have a national conversation with our young people and within our intimate families, how to cool the temperature down. Until we reach that point, the violence won't stop. It can only stop within each person's heart, and each person learning and teaching their children and their spouses and their beloved that things don't have to get out of hand. When things get out of hand, that's a show of gross immaturity, and it won't be tolerated. It won't be tolerated by your peers. It won't be tolerated by our justice system. And I do believe we're just better than that. We've just got to grow up. People having meltdowns because somebody believes differently than you do is just utterly ridiculous. We will get a grip on our wounded healer energy in the USA. But it's not going to be easy. And we've got to stop pointing fingers, and our press has to start acting responsible, because all across the board, I personally never felt this way before, but in the last year and a half, I can completely see how the press just throws gasoline on the flames. Don't do that. Don't allow the papers to do that. Stop reading them. Stop subscribing to them. Bankrupt them. Learn how to talk to the person across from you. Spend your time learning to understand those that think differently. Find the common ground. It's there. Chiron in the sign of Aries is the head, and our heads are sick. When it moves into Taurus, the body parts the throat. So let us start using our thinking minds and learn how to speak more loving to each other so we can create a different world. One that's not filled with fear about going to the church or the grocery store or temple or any place, anytime, anywhere. I'm Parker McPhinney. This is Stardust Stereo. Thank you for listening. I'd like to thank my patrons. You know who you are. If you'd like to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/ParkerMcP. And I want to remind you, you are made of stardust. So go shine.